Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Welcome back to another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, here with Keith Myers, and we're here to talk Seahawks football. Keith, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. It's been a super busy week, non-football related, and kind of a busy week football related. So it's just been it's just one of those things, and I'm ready to talk about it. Let's dive in and talk some Seahawks football.
Sweet. Yeah, it's I was talking to another person a couple days ago about.
Wait, you talk to other people besides me?
Once in a while.
Weird.
Sorry, I know. It's not on Tuesdays though. I don't talk to anybody on Tuesdays except for you.
Good to know.
Yeah, reserve the complete day.
Good. I like it.
I was talking to somebody and he says, well, how much time do you put into that? And I started thinking about it, and I was like, wow, I put in probably total, at least 20 hours a week, from the research, the film, the getting updated on any current news, all the time, taking notes, typing stuff into a Word doc, usually recording the show itself, producing the audio portion, producing the audio and video portion separately, uploading all of the content, and then publishing the content, and then promoting the content, and then just being available in Seahawks world throughout the week. There's a lot of investment in time and resources into that. So, but we have a great time. It's totally worth it. It's a fun thing, and we're heading into our fifth year, and no slowing down. So we got a lot to talk about. So let's get updated on the news and notes for the week for the team. They made a decision on the Carlos Dunlap deal, which we anticipated, and kind of, it could have gone this way or it could have gone the extension way. They didn't come to an agreement yet on an extension, and so he was released. That freed up $14 million plus in salary cap savings to the Seahawks in a year, which they needed all of that money to spend, replacing Dunlap and going to other players. So right now, that gives Seattle approximately $8.6 million in salary cap available to spend in free agency coming up. So they've got the $4 million that was previously on the books, and then the Dunlap deal. What do you think about the way that they handled that? What they had to give to get him in the building, the agreement they kind of made to make him available to test free agency if they couldn't come to an agreement. And it seems like we've seen this movie before.
Well, we have, but at the same time, they gave up a 7th round pick, right? They gave up nothing to bring him in and have him be a difference maker last year, and he was. And
he played on a deal where I think Seattle's out of pocket was $3 million.
Yeah, it was much. And so, he was able to come over and make an impact. They gave up practically nothing to get him, and that's what they're out. If he signs elsewhere, is whatever the nothing was, and whatever, the 7th round pick, and his contribution last year was worth more than that. So they're in the net positive anyways. I'd love to see him stick around, but this isn't the year to pay an aging pass rusher $14 million.
Absolutely.
I mean, you look at the number of guys that are available as really good players, like Yannick and Matt Judon and a bunch of guys that are out there along with Dunlap. And those guys are younger, and They're all going to be available, and there's not a lot of cap space around the league. They're just, I keep saying this every week, and people are starting to catch on when we talk to people on Twitter and that kind of stuff, that there's going to be more players available this year than normal, and there's about half as much spending money across the league as normal. So you got more players, you got less money. Supply and demand just says the prices are going to be driven way down for everything.
I think that the first week of free agency is going to look pretty much like every other first week of free agency. But after that, it's really going to be much different, because
it really is.
It's just going to dry up. The money is going to dry up. All the money is going to go to the premier guys. The first 2 or 3, maybe 4 position group players at each position, the best players. After that, the mid-tier market is going to be drastically affected, and Dunlap is part of that. Dunlap is not a $14 million guy anymore. He's more like a $7 or $8 million guy, and needs to be paid as such. And that was always the intent, I believe, with the team and with Dunlap. He's going to go out and test the market, I would imagine, unless somebody offers him some guaranteed money that looks really good to him. He's going to last. It's going to be one of those deals where he's going to be around in 2 or 3, maybe even longer weeks, and Seattle will be there. I would hope to give him a 1 year or 2 year deal, and he can retest the market next year when there's a lot more money. Don't fret too much about Carlos Dunlap. There's going to be a lot of mid-tier level free agents that could really help the team available this year, as Keith said. Franchise tag time has passed for teams to be able to extend franchise tags to players. Seattle elected not to use theirs this year, kept it in their pocket. So guys like Chris Carson and Shaquille Griffin and a few others were not tagged. That means they're completely unrestricted free agents. That was mostly expected. The free agent contract numbers for cornerback and running back exceed the value that Chris and Shaquille Griffin have. What is your feeling about the Seahawks strategy in free agency with regards to just those 2 players, Keith?
I don't really have a problem with it. I mean, the Seahawks aren't going to use the franchise tag. That's not their thing. And honestly, they haven't used it under Pete Carroll. It's not usually good cap management or team management to use it. And so I just don't see, I never expected it to be. Chris Carson especially, I get that he's really popular and he's a great piece of the offense when he's healthy, but he isn't healthy much, and he'd be costing way more than he should. And it comes down to running back is a position that is, it's undervalued, or it's low value across the league for a reason. And so you have teams that will pay guys like Mixon and Ezekiel Elliott and whatever what they need. But the rest of the league doesn't pay running backs. And so Carson's he's going to go out there, he's going to test the market. He is not going to get, $10 million a year or $8 million a year or whatever. So
what do you think his free agency ranking is in the position group? Do you think he's like the 3rd or 4th guy?
Sure, but it's also running back and nobody cares.
Right. What I'm saying is, the top guys might get a little bit of money. The guy from Green Bay comes to mind, Adams.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, there's really just not going to be a lot there. That's definitely, you're right, that's not going to be the priority position group to sign. So those guys are going to stick around, and the money might even dry up for the top guys as well. And Chris Carson is among those. And he's one of the guys I actually see at least a 50-50 shot to come back on a 1-year deal.
Yeah, and he should.
At a lower number.
That would be ideal for him, because he fits well with what Seattle does. And so he knows if he comes back into Seattle, 1, he'll get playing time, 2, he'll be productive, and it'll allow him to get to next year when there's actually money around and he might get paid. But he's going to go out there and find that there just isn't a market for running backs this year. And if there is, it's going to Aaron Jones. And the rest of the running backs are going to be, there's not going to be a lot. So if he plays for $1 million or $1.5 million, that's probably all he's going to get. And for a top
I
flight,
think he's going to get a little bit more than that, Keith. But I think it's going to take a while. It's going to take
maybe
a few weeks, and we'll see.
I have a hard time seeing our running backs getting paid this year. There's not enough money, and if you're going to spend money on something, it's going to be a pass rusher, and there's a boatload of really good pass rushers available. So that's where the money's going to go, and running backs is going to be sitting there. And eventually, if they want to play, they'll play for less.
On the other hand, Shaquille Griffin is going to have, I think, a similar challenge. He seems to be, you look at all the free agents rankings out there, and you just have the eye test. He's kind of the, in the top 5 available free agents at the position this year, and I just don't see it. Like he's got some injury stuff. He's been very inconsistent. He plays well, definitely at times, and then gets lost at other times. And I'm assuming that he wants, he wants the ATM backed up for him this year, over a $10 million per year kind of a contract.
Yeah, he's thinking like 14.
And to me, he's more of a $7 million kind of a guy. To me, I mean, in any year, not just a COVID-19 recap restriction year. And so, what do you think is going to happen there?
I think he's not a number one. The Seahawks tried him as a number one the last couple of years. He played, so ever since when Sherman left, he had an off year. Then he had a great year, and then he had another off year. Now, last year, part of it was injuries, and there were times when he looked like he was back, and then other times where he just kept, getting lost. I think he's too inconsistent. He's a guy that should be a number 2, and you want someone better than him on the other side. And if that's the case, you don't pay that guy. I think he's a really good number 2, but I think he's a number 2. And the number 2 corners get, like you said, $7 or $8 million in a normal year. And this year it's going to be 5 or 6. He wants to be paid like a number 1 because he's been the Seahawks top corner for the last 3 seasons, but he's not going to get that $14 to $16 million range that you typically give a number 1 corner.
Right. And I think also when you look at his game, he strikes me as the kind of player that is somewhat scheme dependent. And his quality of play is also dependent on either 2 high safety or single high safety with extreme ball skills and sideline to sideline coverage speed, because he needs some protection back there. He needs to have some trust in those guys to be able to play a little tighter with a lot of confidence. And if he doesn't have that, he's just not a good scheme fit for a lot of teams, especially press coverage teams and single coverage guys. He's okay in the zone, but again, it's, I think he's a vulnerability waiting to happen over there.
Yes, I don't think it's that bad. I think he's better than you're giving him credit for. I think that what happens is he ball watches a little bit. He gets where he's peeking in the backfield. He'll start to lag off coverage because he thinks the ball's going to go underneath, and
yes, exactly.
And then it doesn't. But it's not for him. It's real. There's kind of a discipline problem, and I think any team could get to him and really fix him and get him back to where he was a couple of seasons ago when he was a Pro Bowler. I think there's a lot of quality in his game. There's so much inconsistency over the last year or so that I think I don't trust him to be that number 1 guy. And there's significantly better number 1 guys out there. And so I don't want to pay him that. I want him, if I'm going to have him on my team, I'd love to have him, but I'm going to have him there as my number 2 corner. And I'm going to have someone else be the number 1 guy. That's the person I'm going to pay.
League news, Keith. It also affects our franchise quarterback guy indirectly. Dak Prescott deal. 4 years, $160 million with $126 million guaranteed.
Mm-hmm. That's almost a fully guaranteed deal.
That guaranteed money is literally twice as much as Russell Wilson's deal is just 2 years old at this point.
Well, part of it though is what are the guaranteed terms? Is it guaranteed no matter what? Is it guaranteed for injury? Is it, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so there's stipulations with the word guarantee in these contracts. If it's guaranteed for injury, that means
nonetheless, his new money payout averages $42 million in the first 3 years.
Yeah,
each year.
Mm-hmm. And that's what's crazy is that's a lot of money going to Dak Prescott. It's a lot of cap space.
Maybe a top 10 quarterback, but not a top 5 quarterback.
Yeah. And I heard, I think it was Gottlieb or someone today that was like, yeah, he's okay. He's probably a top 15 or whatever. I'm like, you're selling him short.
No. He's a very good quarterback. Don't get me wrong. I don't know that
people are selling him short.
I don't know that he's leading anybody to the promised land right now. I mean, that hasn't happened yet, but they haven't surrounded him with a complete team quite yet.
He's had a really that Dallas is always the most overrated roster.
I agree.
In the NFL, every year they are. Yeah. And so he hasn't had a lot of talent around him. The offensive line was great his rookie year, and I think the second year was better. And then it's really gone downhill. They don't have they
lost Jason Witten, and that really hurt them as far as having him have a dependable outlet. And Ezekiel Elliott being injured a little bit has caused some trouble, and then he had his own injury. So it's just been a kind of a tough time. But I tell you what, the Dallas folks, the Dallas fans are just absolutely, completely annoyed with this thing. I mean, like 7 out of 10 fans are against this, and 3 are really enthusiastic. And I can understand why. It's just a ton of money to pay Dak Prescott. But here's how it kind of ties into the Wilson thing. So Wilson's agent came out last week and said, Russell doesn't want to be traded. The team doesn't want to trade Russell. However, if they so choose to do so, here are the 4 teams that Russ will agree to be traded to. And Dallas was one of those, obviously now off the table. So they made a legit decision to say, we understand Russ could be available to us. We don't want to put the capital together, including like a sign and trade agreement or a franchise tag and trade with Prescott to Seattle for Russell Wilson. They made a decision to stick with their guy that they know. So you gotta hand it to them. I think that's commendable, but at the same time, crazy money that, it has the ability to kind of hamstring you a little bit, but there are 7 to 10 teams in every given year that are pretty hamstrung with 13 to 15% of their cap going to one guy. Seattle's one of them.
Yeah, I mean, and you see, like, Aaron Rodgers was one of them, and he made a deep playoff run, and all of that. I mean, you have guys that do it. This whole thing that you can't pay a top quarterback and still win is nonsense. I mean,
well, and Dak can clearly play, and he can clearly play at a level that can get a team to a Super Bowl, as long as that team has got enough talent around him to get there. A Dak Prescott, for example, on the 49ers instead of Garoppolo, that would be a no-brainer, right?
That's a better team.
Absolutely. Right. So, I mean, you're going to pay those guys. All right. So Russell Wilson, Keith, what's your feeling? Last week, we were kind of still on the page of, this is kind of a public pressure campaign to affect change on the offense, to put Seattle and Russell Wilson in the best position to not only win, go further in the playoffs, get to the Super Bowl and maybe win one, and really kind of etch in the legacy of Russell Wilson. And now, a week later, with really nothing toned down, no language toned down, no statement from the team or Russell Wilson. So everyone's just kind of playing on the same information we had last week, but this thing just seems to not want to end as far as the rumors or the speculation around an actual trade happening. And so what are your current thoughts?
Well, I mean, I do think that when you have a guy like Mike Silver who's plugged in and is not prone to, clickbait and that kind of stuff, he'll say things that are going to be really unpopular, but only if they're backed by his sources, say that this is stronger and more significant than I think some people want to admit. Yeah. To me, I take that very seriously. And I also noticed, and so did everybody else, that the league sent out a thing to season ticket holders, and it lists, players and things to be excited about. And it always, got, different pictures on it. And it didn't include Russell Wilson this year. And that's the first time since 2013 that's been true. And that's very significant. And so that might just be, the sign from the team, to him just being like, if you're going to be petty and whatever, then, we can play that game too.
Yeah, we can make you disappear.
Yeah. But but the longer it goes, right, the longer that this happens, the longer that this drags out, the worse it gets. Because the team and him need to sit down and make this work. And the longer it drags out, it just, people, once you get into that mindset and you have this thought and it just is able to stay with you, and that they don't go in and fix it. It just starts to cement in a little bit more. And I think we could get in a situation where if this continues to drag out and they don't get together and fix it, that draft is going to come around and maybe eating some salary cap and trading him might look, like a really good idea for the Seahawks, because they're like, we just don't want to deal with this anymore.
Now, obviously, Russell's camp and Mark Rogers, his agent, came out and really restricted the Seahawks options by just naming 4 teams. Obviously, Russell Wilson has a no trade clause in his contract. So yes, he can have the final say with any team that Seattle chooses to make a deal with. But if they kind of have an agreement ahead of time, then, so now one of those teams is off the table.
That doesn't mean anything.
I know
that doesn't
it
mean anything.
But what I'm going to say is if he really wants to be traded and Seattle really would like to trade him, you would think that it would be beneficial for all parties to increase the available teams that Russell would consider going to. And
the number,
honestly, there's
the number of teams,
15 teams, well-run teams in the NFL that would be suitable for Russell Wilson to play for, as suitable as Dallas, Las Vegas, Chicago, etc.
Well, the thing is, there is a long list of teams that he would be willing to be traded to.
I would think so.
There are 4 that he kind of threw out there, because that was then we're trying to make the statement he doesn't want to be traded. It's not him, but also tossing some more information at us, being like, hey, let's keep the story going.
Yes,
right. And that's all that was. Yes. But the list is longer than those 4. The Seahawks aren't restricted to those 4.
No.
If the Dolphins really want him, that means,
that's what makes sense, more sense for the Seahawks anyway. I mean, and for Russ, it's a nice little market and a nice upcoming team.
If the Dolphins really want him, he's not on the approved list. So what does that mean? That means that while they're negotiating this, they have to reach out to him and say, Russ, we want you. Here's some additional guaranteed money. Here's an extension. Right? They have to sweeten the pot to him to get him to agree to it. But if they want him, he'll go there, right? And if
the pot would be sweetened for Seattle because there's more competition.
Yeah, and so I mean, and that's really what it comes down to is the Jets and the Dolphins were those names were originally listed as potentials, and then Rodgers came out and basically made sure that they weren't on the list because those are bad teams, but they are also the teams with the capital.
The Dolphins are actually in a pretty good position to take a jump this year, I think.
Yep. And so, but both of those teams have a lot of cap space they can work with. They're legit options, but they didn't want it out there that, this is who the Seahawks should be.
How did we get to this point, Keith?
How did we get to this point?
How did we get to this to allow this to fester to the point where this is what we're talking about today?
Ask Pete Carroll.
A Seattle organization that has the perception has been that the front office is run really well. They take care of their players. It's a place where free agents like to come and stay. And here we are. We've got our best possible player, the best possible player in franchise history that is possibly wanting to leave, and Seattle is legit picking up the phone and also returning phone calls.
Well, I mean, how do we get there? We get there because I think Pete Carroll took him for granted. I think that's really what happened. That, Russ, he is the star. He is the future Hall of Famer. He is that guy. And he goes, you know what? I want to be a part of this. And when he went into that meeting, that planning meeting, the game planning meeting, and said, I've got some ideas on what I want, what we can do to make this, like, turn this around based on what I'm seeing on the field. And he got blown off.
Carroll scoffed at him.
Yeah.
Made him leave the room. I mean, word is he stormed out.
He stormed out. And that's a problem. Right? I mean, you have why would you treat your franchise's player like that? Yeah, you know what? Listen to him. If you don't agree with him, be like, okay,
have
we'll
have an honest conversation.
Have it, and say, this is what we're seeing that's different. And but we get it. We hear what you're saying. Well, take it under consideration. We'll add a couple plays, whatever.
We have a plan.
We have to listen to him, but to blow him off and to be like, no, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, you just pissed off someone for no reason. Like, treat people well. And Pete Carroll's typically really good about that, but he mishandled the situation.
There's
took
no
rest for granted.
Completely clear indication that that's absolutely true. I mean, Russell Wilson could definitely have a hand in being a guy with a large ego that normally is public facing, Mr. Unlimited, Mr. Nice Guy, Mr. Everything he says is right, and stands by the team and all of that stuff. But clearly, behind the scenes, feels like he's free to speak his mind and tries to be clear. And, if he doesn't get his way, maybe he does act out, or is beginning to feel comfortable acting out a little bit more, speaking up a little bit more. And this is just the natural progression of where he's at mentally with his career. Now, to me, from an outside perspective, his career is awesome. He's on a Hall of Fame trajectory. He's threw 40 touchdowns last season, led the NFL. Statistically, for about 8 games, he was the best quarterback in the league in an offense that was allowing him to do everything that he wanted to do. And since that point, since things started to go sideways a little bit, some interceptions, that everything has gone bad since then. And it's hard for me to understand how a team that is still on an upward trajectory overall, 12 wins, we're not that far away. We got a couple pieces to allow this to kind of get to this point is unfathomable to me. And if it's beyond Carroll's ability to contain the situation, where's everyone else? I know Jody Allen, Paul, nothing against Jody, but she's a hands-off kind of owner. She wants to make sure the team is in the right kind of hands with people that know exactly what they're trying to do. And so she kind of backs off a little bit. Would Paul have kind of stepped in and said, hey, listen, this is our franchise guy. We need to figure this out. Is there a void there?
I think there might be. And the reason why there's the void there is because I don't think it's Jody. And I think given the opportunity, she would step in and do those things.
But Colt or Cold or whatever. I mean,
But I think she came in the middle and has deferred to Pete because Pete's, kind of the football czar. And
right.
Because she came in the middle after Pete was established, I think she doesn't want to interject. Given an opportunity with a new coach, all that, she might be more involved. But it's a weird dynamic to her coming in the middle after Paul Allen passed away. So, I mean, really, what it comes down to is I do think that the team has mishandled this from the beginning. And from the beginning, I don't mean this offseason when Wilson started talking. It was from the moment Wilson went into that meeting and was saying, hey, I've got some ideas. And I think it was completely mishandled. And when he got pissed and stormed out, and there wasn't an effort made to go in and fix things at that moment and hear his frustrations and make it work.
Do you think that cap was also put on Brian Schottenheimer at the exact same time? Do you think that Brian Schottenheimer shared those ideas with Russell Wilson mid-season, went to Pete to try to make some adjustments? Pete said, no, we're going to do it this way. And both of them saw the writing on the wall. Russ stormed out. Eventually, Brian Schottenheimer was fired. Is that the philosophical difference that we're talking about?
No, because Pete or Brian Schottenheimer was in on that planning meeting. He was one of the people who blew Wilson off. It wasn't just Pete Carroll. So I think that you're
reading it wrong.
Yeah, I think that part of Russell's problem is that
nobody was listening.
Nobody was listening to him. If Schottenheimer was listening to him and trying to do the things that calling the plays that Russ wanted and all of that, Russ wouldn't have remained pissed throughout the rest of the season. Instead, he just got progressively more annoyed at what was going on, and we all saw
progressively deteriorated.
Yeah, well, I mean, and the thing is, like in some sense, Wilson was right. Like, you cannot keep doing what the team was doing and expect results. The teams were other teams adapted. They knew what was going to happen. It was pretty obvious what Seattle wanted to do. They just didn't adapt in any way, and you could just see Russ getting more and more frustrated. They kept running out the same game plan every week, and it didn't work every week.
All right, we will report back. Silver seems to think something's going to happen this next week. I do too. Free agency is right around the corner. Starts, I think unofficial tampering is 15th. Free agency starts on the 17th, something like that. Something's got to give here. The sooner the better for the Seahawks to move forward, either with Russ or without, unfortunately. And we'll just see what happens. It's, one way or another, it's gotta get resolved. Let's talk about prospects. So this week, we're going to be talking about the NFL draft prospects coming up in the tight end and wide receiver groups. And so Keith and I have both studied these things and drew up a list of players independently to kind of bring into the conversation as players, up and down the draft from, the second round through the seventh that would be available that are kind of good Seahawk fits as we typically like to do. So I think we just get started with the tight ends, Keith. And, the guys at the top, are unlikely unless there's a trade to be available to the Seahawks, Kyle Pitts, Pat Freiermuth, those guys, maybe Brevin Jordan might be right on the edge of that. But guys after that look like they would be around. So what are your thoughts?
Well, the team has looked at tight ends in the free agent market. I mean, they've been tied to some bigger names. And so I think that if the team's going to go tight end, it's going to be that route. If they end up in the draft looking for one, it's going to be later. They just don't have the draft capital, and they have much bigger needs.
So why do you think that they would prioritize tight end in free agency? Seems like they've tried that a few times. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. They've got a couple good draft picks on the roster currently. And, a guy doesn't have a lot of playing experience yet, but a lot of upside. And then, but they have been tied to the guy from the Eagles, Eric Ernst, and then Kyle Rudolph just got released from Minnesota. I haven't heard any word yet if Seattle's going to have him in or anything, but it would be illogical for at least them to look at that. Solving that, though, in a cap restricted type of season where there's not a tremendous amount of money to spend, if you're going to get one of those top guys, it's likely that's going to be, in a 2-year deal with a somewhat lower cap hit in the first year, but you're still looking at, a 2-year, $14-15 million deal for some of those premier guys, I would think.
Yeah. And so I think what they're looking for is they're looking at, when they are showing interest and all of that, what it comes down to is they're trying to gauge what the market's going to be to get a guy that they can add to the list. But at the same time, what are they trying to do? They're trying to get another weapon that they can use for Wilson. But at the same time, they're trying to gauge what the market is. Like, okay, if we can go get Zach Ertz and stick him on the line and have that level of playmaker at tight end, well, then maybe that makes a Tyler Lockett trade a little more palatable. And so they can get one weapon, lose and trade another, and trade that one for draft capital that they can use to fill other holes. And so I think that's kind of what they're looking at. It's not they desperately need a tight end. It would be nice to get one. They think it'll be cheaper to get one there than at wide receiver. But I don't think it's like a must.
Look at the Rams offense. I mean, you got a guy that's catching 45, 50 balls there in Everett. He's more of a receiving tight end type. They're not yet looking at inline blocking guys. These are guys out there catching a lot of balls and moving sticks for their respective teams. So they do have their eye on that sort of a guy. Hollister seemed like he would be maybe that in 2019, but in 2020, it kind of took a step back, didn't get a lot of opportunity, it seemed, as far as targets. You could bring back Hollister on a cheap deal and kind of fill that role, if you didn't want to lose a guy like Lockett or something.
Mm-hmm. And that really kind of what it comes down to is, like I said, they're looking at, can they upgrade that position, give Wilson another legit veteran weapon, and do so cheaper than Lockett. So they would replace him cheaper and get a draft pick out of it, like a second round pick.
That's a step down. Lockett gave you 100 catches last year for over 1,000 yards, and it would be totally for any tight end in our system to do that.
Totally, and I'm not trying to say that it would just parallel, but you get some cap room, which they need, and a draft pick. And so it's like, what's the total production that you get out of?
Feel really good about the kid, the new guy, the third, fourth wide receiver that we had last year.
Swain.
Freddie Swain, in order to be able to kind of move on or pick up a guy in the draft you really like and are targeting. Let's talk about tight ends though in the draft, Keith. They're to me, the tight end class is average. But that's okay. There's still some guys that are going to be available rounds 3 through 7, I think, that are probably on the Seahawks radar, at least to look at. What are some of the good fits out there?
I know some people have said, "Ooh, this is this is an interesting tight end class." I kind of don't like this tight end class.
Yeah,
to be honest,
it's average. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a couple of intriguing names and a couple of guys that can do some intriguing things to me, but other than that, it's okay.
Yeah, I mean, and so it's like looking at kind of, we're looking at the guy like Trey McKitty out of Georgia, 6'4", 247. He's a move tight end, right? He's a pass catching tight end when you're going to move all over the field. He's not going to be a lineup, right next to the right tackle and block all the time. But he is, not a bad blocker, just kind of a little undersized and that kind of stuff. But he has, the ability to kind of be dynamic and get up and
do
make
a lot
some
of
stuff
things well. He can be on line for you. He can move outside. He can, he's going to move. He's going to get first downs for you.
He kind of reminds me a little bit of like Nick Vannett.
He's a little undersized.
Or Luke Wilson,
yes.
Where they're athletic guys that can do a lot of things well, but they're not great at anything. You could line him up at fullback, at H-back, you could put him at tight end, you could put him in the slot, and he'll do all those things fine. And I'm thinking you're going to be able to get him in the 4th round, 5th round, somewhere in there, and have a guy that you can depend on, but he's not going to light things up. This isn't a game changer, but it's a good scheme fit for what Seattle does and what they need.
Yeah, I like Trey McKitty, and he was in the Senior Bowl, and I thought he was one of the most impressive guys there as far as just moving smoothly. And from the reports out of there, seemed like he was a willing blocker, a good teammate, a guy that was showing up to work with the lunch pail type of a thing, not afraid to get in and block, willing blocker, which is really important for Pete, even though he is at 247 pounds. So he is going to play a little bit in the H-back role in the slot. Maybe a guy like that could be a lead blocker for you occasionally on as a fullback, possibly. A guy that I looked at closer to the top of where Seattle would be picking, or slightly lower in the third round, would be kind of a Hunter Long kind of a guy, kind of more of a receiving guy. The reason I listed him was just because Seattle is looking at some of those free agent guys. If they don't solve that in free agency, because those guys are either too expensive or choose to go elsewhere, a guy like Hunter Long might be somebody that they're keeping their eye on. Nice, tall, big guy, 6'5", 254, productive in college at Boston College. He's a good route runner. He's available to catch the ball and evade tackles and move in space with the yards after catch. And I think in the Shane Waldron kind of a thing, they really want to get somebody to be able to do that. And right now on the roster, we've got Parkinson, but he's awfully big to be able to move in space and give you yards after catch in the middle. He's more of a red target, red zone kind of a guy for me. But again, we haven't seen him in the offense, last year's offense, or in Waldron's scheme. And so it remains to be seen exactly how they'll want to use him. But obviously they're looking for somebody a little bit more dynamic. So I would think that they would be looking for a guy that's more of a receiving tight end in this draft. And maybe, they've got a guy on the practice squad that they have is more of an inline guy, obviously. Whatchamacallit? I'm sorry, I'm just horrible on names today. Our other tight end from the University of Washington. He's has the ability to block. So they may covet those guys that can actually move the chains this year. What else you got, Keith?
Well, I mean, the only other guy because I tried to stay away from the guys at the top, and I was tempted to, talk about, Tommy Tremble out of Notre Dame, but I just think that's too early. He's going to be that the Seahawks would have to use their first pick.
Well, I don't know. I think he's I don't know.
Okay. I mean, maybe not in
third or fourth round guy.
Maybe not in the 50s, but if they traded back into the 60s or 70s, I mean, that's I think where he's going to go.
He's the best blocker in college football. He's undersized too. He's only 248, but he's wants to inflict pain and suffering on people.
And so the thing is, and that's kind of why I thought about him, is because he's a great inline blocker. He would be he and Will Disley would fight for who gets to kill more people in the running game, because both of them are outstanding blockers for the run game and that kind of stuff. But I just think that's too early for tight end for the Seahawks. And especially with guys like Trey McKitty, Hunter Long, Kenny Yabo out of Ole Miss, who's 6'4", 247. He's also more of a guy that can block, but he can do both things again. Yes. He's more versatile. But I think that that would be a good fit for Shane Waldron's offense. But it comes down to what do they want? And I could see them going that route with a more versatile guy, a more Nick Vannett, Luke Wilson kind of guy, or just throwing that all out and going with a guy like Miller Forrestall out of Alabama, right? 6'5", 234, so way undersized in terms of weight, but but still tall, moves well. He's basically just a big wide receiver. Or what I mean? He doesn't move quite well enough to be a wide receiver.
Right. So you kind of take it in the opposite direction. Who's the kid that we had last year, Sullivan, that we drafted kind of in that mold, ended up switching him over to defensive end, then he moved on off the practice squad and is now signed with another team, but kind of in that sort of a situation.
Yeah, kind of the same idea. And so
it's crazy, Keith, because I think we've been talking about the tight ends for about 10 minutes now, and we're literally done because it's really not that deep.
It's not.
This could be definitely the year that they probably bring in 2 or 3 bodies in unrestricted, undrafted free agents to compete especially if it's the blocking tight end position that they're trying to address. A lot of those guys, the pass catching guys and more athletic guys with any speed at all at the position, they tend to get swooped up pretty fast. But a lot of those blocking guys are available later on, especially that can contribute to special teams, maybe come in and block for you for a couple plays a game at fullback if you need a short yardage deal. So
yeah, I mean, if you're looking for a guy that you can get as an undrafted free agent, maybe Hunter Campmoyer out of Oregon would be a good one. He's 270 pounds. This isn't a guy that moves well, but you can line him up at right tackle, and he can block for you. Like obviously he's undersized to be a right tackle, but he blocks like a right tackle. And so if you're looking for just a guy that's going to come in and block and really maul people in the running game and make life hard for opposing teams, I mean, you got a guy like that after the draft is over.
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah, there's a lot of guys out there like that. Exactly. All right. So the wide receiver class is actually one of the best classes, position group classes in the draft. It's loaded up with guys probably rounds 1 through 5 that can come in and immediately help you at least to the third wide receiver level. In this class, there's a lot of undersized guys as well that are really dynamic slot guys that can help you in the return game. And then just big bodied guys, obviously, that can move the chains and take the ball down the field for you. So all sorts of guys all the way through the draft. Obviously the guys at the top will not be available unless there's some massive trade for Seattle. And we're doing okay right now at the top on our own roster. So we're really looking for guys that can fill in. And probably one of the players that Shane Waldron might have a hand in selecting if Seattle decides to go wide receiver, a guy that would fit exactly what they want to do in that position, a guy that can block. Shane Waldron's wide receivers are not afraid to be physical, and they possess the ball really well. You don't have to necessarily have top end speed, but we saw that in Goff's offense, where Goff couldn't really get the ball down the field past 20 yards very well, very effectively. But with Seattle, obviously, if Wilson's still there, we do have the ability to stretch the field and take some shots. And so they may want somebody with a little bit more speed too this year.
With Lockett and Metcalf there, getting a guy with speed isn't necessarily the requirement unless they move on from Lockett.
Yes, and Lockett's only got 1 year left.
Yeah, and so trading him now rather than letting him walk in a year in order to get the draft capital that they need. It's okay. Then you kind of have to look at what you can get in that kind of role. But I was looking more at the Rams offense, and I go, the Seahawks are better than Woods on the outside, right? And Metcalf, I would take Metcalf over Robert Woods like every day of the week.
Right. He's and I'm very excited to see what Metcalf can do in this offense. He's going to get a lot more opportunities, I believe, in shorter yardage pickups.
He's already that's already a major upgrade. But what they don't have is Cooper Kupp, right? They Absolutely. Don't. I mean, David Moore is probably the closest thing they've had, and he's an unrestricted free agent. But
Freddie Swain is a little undersized.
He's undersized for that. So that big slot, that guy that's a possession receiver.
Anquan Bolden kind of a guy.
Yeah.
With a little bit more speed, maybe.
Yep.
Just a guy that's a total possession guy.
Total possession guy, big target, middle of the field, not afraid to get hit, but also isn't just, like a tight end, right? A little more dynamic than that. And I think that, Moore could have been that guy. He does better on the outside because he's just not that quick, on the inside, even as the big slot. But I was kind of looking for that guy. Like that was what I was hoping for when I was going through and fighting. Not that there's not a lot of other people to look at, and this is, like you said, a loaded class.
Well, what size guy are you looking for in this role? A bigger guy or a guy that's 6 foot 195 or a slight guy?
Because if you're looking for that, you got Freddie Swain. He's already on the roster, and that's who he is. He's not an outside guy. He's a slot guy who's 6 foot 6.5 or something. And you got that. I was looking for a guy who's going to be 6'3",
Yeah, well,
Um,
I've got two guys, but one is undersized height wise, but it's is solid. But yeah, go ahead. Who's your guy that you like first in that role?
so there's quite a few.
Like a Seth Williams? Do you like Seth Williams?
That wasn't who I
6'2",
had.
224 from Auburn.
Um,
He's a great slot kind of slant route guy. That's a anyway.
I was
That
looking
guy would be
more.
good in that too.
I was looking more at like Simi Fehoko out of Stanford, who's 6'4", 227. So he's big, he's tall, he can get. He's basically David Moore, right? He's not the fastest guy down the field, but he's big, huge catch radius, uses his body well. I just think that you move him inside and let him play that
Yeah.
big slot where he's being matched up against safeties and slot corners who are not going to be able to match him size wise, and he could be really productive in there and come at a significant discount to a David Moore.
Yeah, no doubt, because that guy would probably be available in I don't
Fifth
know
round.
yeah, probably down into that range, or uh maybe even the sixth, top of the sixth type of guy.
Yeah,
There's
I
so
was
many
thinking.
wide receivers. I mean, he's probably the 24th or 25th ranked wide receiver. But looking at this class, you've got at least 20 guys go in the first 3 rounds.
Yeah, and so you look at this is a really deep class. You're going to be able to get these guys later, but also remember, David Moore was a 7th round pick, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was a guy that was big. People thought maybe he wasn't really fast. He wasn't really quick, but he was big, a big catch radius. And the Seahawks were like, I threw a 7th round pick at him to see something, and they've got some pretty good production from him over the last 3 years. So he's an unrestricted free agent. If they don't bring him back, how do you
right. So what is your idea?
Replace that?
Is your idea? So last week we talked about Seattle bypassing the 2017 draft. I think it was the 17, maybe it was the 18, where it was completely loaded draft class at the wide receiver group. Seattle bypassed the entire thing when we were absolutely sure that they would select somebody. And this year is not quite to that level, but it's pretty darn close as far as its depth, quality depth across the board and across all the rounds. And if Tyler Lockett is moving on, possibly either via trade or it's his contract year, next year you absolutely know for a fact he wants top 10 money, if not top 5 money, based on some advanced stats. He can make that argument. Do you take a look at replacing that sort of a player this year, in a year where you're limited in the amount of draft picks that you have and cap money to spend in free agency if they choose to take care of this position in free agency? Or do you start to look at players like that, like a De'Ami Brown, which is kind of a Tyler Lockett kind of player? He's got a little bit more size than Tyler, but he's got that 10, 7, 8, 10 meter dash speed out of high school. So he's very dynamic. Yards per catch average is way up there. He kind of stretches the field, but he also looks like he could expound his route tree at the next level, just based on the fact that he can get off the line of scrimmage pretty good and create quick separation. So he should be able to run some slants and some goes and some curls, all that kind of stuff. That would be an interesting player, and I think that he could play both in the slot and out wide too, just like Tyler Lockett could. So somebody like that interests me as well. Dwayne Eskridge is kind of a smaller version, similar in size to Tyler Lockett, gives you that burner speed. There was one other guy. Hold on, I got to find him really quick because he had this 100-meter dash. Oh, this guy, Anthony Schwartz. This is a guy that's interesting to me because not a tremendous amount of playing experience, but he does have playing experience, college football playing experience at wide receiver. He's not like Cyril Grayson out of LSU, where he had zero actual football experience, but was a track star there. This guy's a track star, ran a 10.07. The guy I just mentioned before that ran a 10.79. This guy ran a 10.09. Fastest wide receiver in the class, but he needs some development, needs a little bit of time. This is a guy that might be available in like the 5th round, that just has exceptional athleticism and quickness and body control and stuff. And he's still learning the position. But a guy like that, speed in the NFL is everything. And if you guys have speed at that level, he could learn to return the ball. He could learn to play some slot. He could extend the field for you on some flies. I don't know. It's a deep class. There's a lot of guys that you could talk about. But that's just one guy. There's a couple of guys in the draft class too that kind of remind me of, what was our old wide receiver that we picked up from Michigan? It's been around the league for 10, 11 years. Small guy, but larger guy that could move. Golden Tate. There's a lot of guys here that remind me a little bit of Golden Tate, as far as, and one of those guys is Amari Rogers. A guy that's got some return ability, and the guy that's only like 5'9.5" or 5'10", but he's 211 pounds. I almost wonder if that kind of a guy could be a running back for you. He's got that. He looks like a running back. He runs like a running back on the field, but he catches the ball in possession.
That was Golden
kind
Tate,
of a guy.
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Golden Tate was a running back
exactly.
who was learning to play wide receiver, and the Seahawks drafted him and did some great things. And one of the things that this is a team, and you'd think it's weird with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett on the team, but they were one of the worst teams in the league in yards after catch, even with those guys. And that
didn't scheme anybody. We didn't help anybody with the scheme.
Yeah, that was entirely a scheme problem. That won't be the case in Waldron's offense, where he will scheme guys open and
that's where a guy like Dwayne Eskridge could just really be absolutely dynamic in your offense. I mean, that guy, I've heard rumors, everyone's got him going from, the third or fourth round entering the Senior Bowl to now after the Senior Bowl, above the third round, maybe getting into the second or somehow inching his way all the way to the back of the first round, which I do not believe will happen.
Out of Western Michigan.
Yeah, he's also a 24-year-old prospect, so that's going to definitely be a consideration. That alone would push him down, I think, a couple rounds. But he'd be a special teams guy that you could have return kicks. He's got a 4.33 40. He's a yards after catch guy, former state champion sprinter. He's definitely going to be your developmental third wide receiver on your roster. But you've got Swain there as well. So, and David Moore's likely moving on. So, I think they'll definitely address that particular position, and whether it's in the draft or free agency, it depends on how much they value, how much input Shane Waldron has on getting getting a weapon that he feels like he needs to have in that offense to really make it work. And it might be a guy that's just got a ton of speed and really dynamic and a hedge against Tyler Lockett.
One of the things that's weird about this year is you have guys who opted out because
that makes everything hard.
And so you have guys that are available in this draft class, and you don't know how teams are going to view them. Are they going to look back, not this year, the year before, the 2019 season, and look at that tape and evaluate them, or are they going to, is it going to hurt them that they didn't play for a year? And because most football players, you take a full year off, it just never the same. And so kind of look at that and you go, what do we do with those guys? And the one that's really interesting to me is Nico Collins out of Michigan. Again, you can tell what I was looking at, 6'4", 215. This is a guy with big catch radius, nice speed. If he had played this year, we might be talking, a first-round pick, someone who could be drafted in the 20s type of thing. But he didn't play.
Yeah, a lot of folks still have him going, in the mid-second round,
Yeah, and so is he going to go in the 50s? Is he going to go?
It depends on how fast he runs. I mean, if he's got a pro day, Keith, and he runs in the 4.4s somewhere, this kid could go, pretty early in the second round. He's kind of a DK Metcalf, kind of a mold, 6'4", 215.
Yeah, but he's not that fast.
He's not, I don't think so. I think he's more of a 4.55 guy, which is probably going to put him into maybe the third round, but just because of the lack of tape on him.
Yeah, and so you just look at a guy like that, and that the talent's there, and all that stuff. But he also didn't play last year, and he's not going to be a burner even at. He's he's fast, but he's not DK Metcalf. There's only one DK Metcalf.
So do you think the guy like that doesn't have the speed, doesn't have the separation ability, is pegged in the NFL as more of a either a possession guy or a red zone guy, similar to like a Parkinson that would be on our team, just because his route tree will be somewhat limited based on his speed?
I don't know. I mean, David Moore wasn't fast, and they got him deep. And they
David
got him
Moore
deep.
was actually faster than you think he was.
He
Yeah, I
just
think
didn't.
David Moore
Okay.
ran a 4.48 at his pro day,
Well,
but
then, but
but
he didn't. He
he
didn't
didn't
play
seem
that
faster.
fast.
He did not. He was in quicksand half the time returning the football.
But they still were able to get him deep because of his size, right? They knew that they could throw him open.
Yeah, he could have good straight line speed.
Collins is a guy that his tape from not this year but the year before has a lot of back shoulder throws and acrobatic catches and those kind of things. And I just think he would fit in well in Seattle, in Waldron's thing. He blocks well. He can make those tough catches. He can move some chains. He can get deep, like if you need him to. He's not a guy he's not a burner. Like
he just didn't,
Metcalf, but he's just got so many things that he does well
at Michigan, and it's true with a lot of quarterbacks from Michigan. You're not helping your wide receivers get into the NFL if you're going to play at Michigan, right? So
yeah.
He didn't have a lot of help. He had a quarterback that couldn't take advantage of his straight line speed and the ability that he had in the red zone. And the mismatches that he would have on the boundaries. And, when you don't have a quarterback that can get you a ball out there, you're not going to have a lot of stats. And then you're right. The whole 2020 thing hurt him and a number of other players. And so it'll be very interesting. I think that's why the undrafted market this year is going to be crazy. And, Schneider has always been excellent at getting guys to pay attention to the Seahawks. So, but this guy is definitely going to get drafted. I'm just saying that, it'll push some guys out of this draft that likely probably would have been drafted had there not been a pandemic. So,
yeah. And that's kind of the thing. I mean, it's just weird because he didn't play last year, right? He completely opted out of the year. And it's like, how's that going to work? Is that going to work for him? Is that going to work against him?
Mm-hmm.
And we just don't know. Like, if he played, and this was a non-pandemic year, and it was normal, there's a really good chance he goes into this as someone who's going to be picked 23rd in the draft. Because it's the pandemic year, because he opted out, what happens if he's available in the 70s or 80s? If you're Seattle and you've got that pick,
you've traded down, right? You got an extra pick now. You can take a chance maybe on a guy.
Yeah, you got a couple extra picks, and he's sitting there, and you go, "There's so much talent."
Would they pick him, or would they pick more of a sure guy that's going to give you pro ready, more pro ready?
Is Tyler Lockett still
like
on the roster?
Jamie Brown. Yeah, let's just say the roster hasn't changed on the wide receiver group. And
if Tyler Lockett's still on the roster, you go for the higher upside guy that might need a year of development, because you've got your two guys. You got the guys that are gonna make and break your offense as far as the receiver position, and you also know that Lockett's a free agent after the year, and so you draft a guy that has the potential to be a game changer a year from now.
Yeah, I do. I also take a guy that could be a game changer this year as well as next year, and so you take a look at a guy like Tylan Wallace, for example, out of Oklahoma, 6 foot, 195, right? He's not a huge guy, but he's got 4.33 speed. He's going to be available at that 56-ish spot that Seattle's looking at, maybe slightly earlier, maybe a little later if they drop back. But this guy's a guy that can, in 2018, he was led the Big 12 with 1,491 yards, which was good enough to rank second in the entire nation, finalist for the Blitnikoff Award. And then he tore his ACL. And then he had a recovery year where he was down a little bit. But 2020, he was back. And he left school with 3,400 yards, 26 touchdowns. He's physical. He's got powerful hands. He's a contested catch mismatch. And high points the ball really well. This is a guy that could eventually take over for Tyler if Tyler Lockett leaves in free agency. And after the 2021 season, you've already got a year under your belt in the offense, and you're ready to take over on day one in 2022. So a guy like that would definitely be on Seattle's radar, I think, just from the point of this guy when he's on the field in open space and his willingness to block would be a ideal fit in Shane Waldron's scheme.
Yeah, I could see it. I'm always a little leery of air raid wide receivers. I think so much of their accomplishments in college are.
Well, they certainly didn't have to work as hard on route running. So when they come into the NFL, they do need to be able to tighten that up and crisp that up a little bit more. But, Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf are awesome teachers, and you just can't teach speed. The guy's got 4.33 speed.
Yeah, you can't teach speed. And, with the Seahawks, they brought in Dorsett last year. They may bring Dorsett back on a 1-year deal with for like $1 million, league minimum kind of deal. That's a lot of speed, and they love speed, right? And they drafted Lockett, they drafted Richardson, they drafted Metcalf, they signed Dorsett. This is a team that loves speed.
Yeah, right. And I think that Seattle's gonna get a receiver in this draft. I just feel it. I just think that they will. It's either going to be a Dwayne Eskridge kind of a guy, or a Seth Williams if they want the possession guy, or it's going to be a Whop Philor, the slot receiver with the yards after catch ability.
Yes, but his name is Whop.
I know. Right? That's awesome. You know why? It's his nickname. He liked Burger King Whoppers when he was a kid, so he got the nickname.
Oh, nice! I didn't know. That's actually kind of awesome. Now, I like the name more.
Yeah, he's the king. And he's a kind of a fourth, fifth round guy. There's a lot of guys in that fourth, fifth round, and Seattle has picks there. Yeah. And I think that makes a lot of sense to be able to get a guy that can have an impact on your roster with that fourth or fifth round pick. You kind of want to stretch your value there. And I think Seattle's an opportunity to do that. Another guy is Daz Newsome, slot receiver again with yards after catch abilities, 5'11", 190. He's not small. And in college, he gave you 126 catches for 1,702 yards, 16 touchdowns the last 2 seasons. And he's a good route runner with excellent quickness and hands and ball skills. And he's a great competitor. And I think he would be an excellent fit. So there's going to be some value here out of this class. Sage Surratt, another guy, a big slot guy with ball possession skills, kind of a David Moore replacement kind of guy. We talked about Anthony Schwartz already as having a world-class speed. Marlon Davis, again, a 6-foot guy, but he's 222 pounds. Could he be a running back, big slot receiver with terrific hands and ball skills and all that kind of stuff. Shea Smith was the best player on the field for many games at South Carolina at 5'10", 186. In fact, when he went out with an injury later in the year, the team kind of fell apart on offense without him out there. And at the Senior Bowl, he was hard to cover. And so a guy like that has a lot of ball skills and body control and the ability to get up even at 5'10" and win contested catches and high point the ball is a really good trait. There's some others, but that's the gist. I really like Amari Rodgers for some reason. I'm drawn to Amari Rodgers in this class because I think he's undervalued. A lot of folks don't have him, in the top 4 rounds. A lot of guys are putting him in the 5th, 6th round, and I don't quite get it. He's almost 5'10". He's 211 pounds. He ran a 4.49 40 and a 38 inch vertical jump at a Nike Pro Day when he was younger. And, he's 77 receptions for 1,000 yards in 2020. He's a slot receiver, but he's built like a running back. This is one of the guys that reminds me of Golden Tate. They schemed him open. They allowed him to get into space. He's got great vision and burst. And really decisive in the way that he runs his routes. And he's a good leader. He's a guy that Seattle would look at as being a character guy that you could bring onto the roster as well. So He was be definitely on their radar as far as I can tell. Just looking at the draft over the last 10 years, guys like that are really important to Seattle to have on the roster. And he would be a special teams guy too. So that's all I've got on my list.
I say one of the guys that I find really interesting, but I don't know if I would take him if I was a GM, is Jalen Darden out of North Texas, 5'9", 170. I mean, this is a guy that is going to make Paul Richardson look well built.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I've got him rated in the top of the 4th round.
But a dynamic athlete, just I mean, his ability to stop and then restart. It is going to kill cornerbacks and safeties. They're going to hate him. And he's just got electric downfield speed. I mean, just an elite runner. His ability to just stop on a dime and make people miss.
And immediately he would upgrade your return game because he was their primary returner.
Yeah, and
at North Texas.
And just a crazy phenomenal athlete. But at 5'9", 170, you're going to be worried that he's never going to be healthy.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because I think he would do better outside. So when you take a look at like Waldron's scheme, and I want to talk about this, and eventually we will talk about this later on in the year after the draft and stuff, is Shane Waldron's scheme. And you know how they run a lot of bunch and tight formations where they've got 10 guys lined up really close together and one guy out wide. But a guy like Jalen Darden seems to me like he would be more into a wide zone. What am I trying to say? A spread offense.
Yep.
And where everything's kind of stretched horizontally. I wonder if Seattle can do that within a Waldron scheme because they run a wide zone. So they are trying to stretch the field horizontally. And so a guy like that may find a role in there. The other guy I was thinking about too is the UCLA running back who they're thinking about converting to a wide receiver, Demetric Felton. He looked absolutely dynamic in Senior Bowl practices. I don't know if you had a chance to watch some of the Senior Bowl practice film.
I didn't watch nearly as much as I'm used to.
Yeah, this guy was beating everybody, even including the top corners in the senior draft class. And he started out as a running back. They shifted him into the slot on a lot of different plays at UCLA and project him as a slot guy in the NFL, along with return abilities. But he's only 5'9", 189, but he's just electric with the ball. And his route running was stellar in practice. And that might be another guy that they have kind of earmarked as kind of a bottom of the roster, 5th wide receiver, come in and do a lot of multi-wide receiver sets, which I think will happen in this offense when they take a tight end out, 3 and 4 wide receivers, and a guy like that that can stretch the field or get him open in space. When you're doing 4 wide receiver routes, you can create a lot of mismatches and opportunities to create separation. And a guy like that would thrive, I think, in an offense like this.
Yeah. And I mean, it really comes down to like what does this team feel like it needs right now in order to run this offense? Because you're going to put Metcalf out there in what was the Robert Woods role and with the Rams, and I feel like they need to go find themselves that big slot, the Cooper Kupp type, but maybe they like Freddie Swain in that role. I mean, he definitely showed some flashes and promise this last year, and so they go, okay, well, we kind of got that. You'll find a spot for Lockett, and then it's like, well, maybe they don't feel like they need a guy that's going to get a lot of playing time now, so they want to get someone that they feel can make an impact as a returner and a special teams and that kind of stuff.
Bring back Dorsett on a veteran minimum deal, they may feel like they've solved that spot and they can look elsewhere on the roster to make sure that they're completely covered. And then, of course, bring in a little bit of competition, and
I do hope they make it out of this draft with a player and not do the 2018 thing where you had a super deep wide receiver draft and they
when
didn't.
these things happen.
Yeah, and they didn't take one. So
Yeah, you're maximizing your value. I think if you get a guy here in the fourth or fifth round, I don't know that they go out and spend a big pick early on wide receiver in this draft. I think hopefully they would turn their attention into the trenches on the first pick, or if Javonte Williams is sitting there or something, crazy, you jump on something like that, or Najee Harris, or they get extra draft capital. So interesting. Yeah, I think the wide receiver class is really solid. I mean, really solid top to bottom, and Seattle should try to come away with a pick, especially if they pick up 2 or 3 extra picks. I think you will see them spending some draft capital there. And then the tight end thing, it's been proven that they're looking for guys right now to come in and take advantage of the guys that have been cut, so they're not competing, with everybody, just where the player really wants to play. And so that will be interesting to see if anything happens before free agency. Likely, knowing Seattle, they will be exceedingly patient, hopefully, in this free agency period, because it's going to be crazy. Like they don't have enough money to spend at the top, so they're going to have to wait a little bit. And the longer that they wait, I think the better value and the more opportunity they'll have to kind of fill out the roster with really good quality players, and we'll be there again, especially if Russell Wilson comes back. Likely spend a little bit of money, hopefully, on that center position, and or left guard. And I think they're close. They've just got a few pieces to add, take care of the running back spot, the offensive line, and a couple spots on defense with defensive backs and a pass rusher. And I think things are going to be better than people think. But the schedule next year doesn't do any favors to us. I think it's going to be a little tougher this next year to get to 12 wins. But we got to do what we got to do. I mean, if we want to retain Russell Wilson long term, we got to figure out a way to get to that conference championship.
Anytime you have a year when you don't play the NFC and AFC East, you're going to have a tougher year than the years when you do, because those divisions they're pretty bad. And that's who the Seattle played last year. So the schedule had a lot to do with, I think, with them getting to 12 instead of 10 or 11, which is more where the talent was. But yeah, I mean, this team isn't that far. They really aren't. And I know that they've been in salary cap, kind of sense, but a lot of that went away when they cut Dunlap, because they just saved $14.5 million.
Yeah.
And now they've got 18.5, which is more than enough to pay the. And
that's just the first move. Let's be honest.
It's just the first, but now they've got wiggle room. They can go and they can be players in free agency. They're not going to go get the top flight guy. They're not going to sign anyone to some massive contract.
They could get the All-Pro center there from Green Bay, Lindsay.
True.
And everybody's talking about that, which probably means it won't happen. But nonetheless, if you're really serious about keeping Russell Wilson, keeping him happy, you're going to at least attempt to get the best players in and have a roster on opening day that talent-wise on paper is competitive with anybody, and gives you the best chance out of the gate. And that's all you can ask for. And I think that's all Russell Wilson is asking for, is like, let's get me the best roster heading into the season that we can put together and give me a shot at this thing. And if Pete is wise, and he is a wise person, he's been around football a lot. He's proven he's adaptable. I don't know why he's not adaptable to this particular situation, but maybe this is the year. Maybe this is okay. Wake up call, and I'm going to do whatever I need to do to make sure my franchise guy is taken care of. And if that means I need to adjust and adapt my offense a little bit, while trying to keep as much of the ball integrity and the efficiency that I need to have to be comfortable, then I'm going to do that. And there seems to be an opening to have some sort of happy medium and middle place where they can meet, and both sides would be happy. I mean, Pete came out and said, I want to improve the running game. I want to improve the offensive line. And those are the areas that Russell Wilson could benefit as well. And we already know they're going to add, they're looking at tight end. They brought in a scheme guy in Waldron that is directly, at least we think, going to enhance Russell Wilson's skill set. So to me, I don't know that I would want to leave that situation. It seems like a pretty decent situation to me. It's always seems like it's greener on the other side, but your own situation is manageable as long as you approach it in a way that is respectful and,
But that's the thing is approaching it in a way that's respectful. And I feel like,
and both sides are guilty.
yeah, and it does feel like, just from everything that we found out in that athletic article, that the coaching side of it was not overly respectful of Wilson,
which is
when
a
it
little
came
odd
time.
because you've always heard that the Pete Carroll Russell Wilson relationship dynamic has always been really tight and really positive and solid. And they might have a little bit of philosophical difference as far as, scheme and so forth. But nonetheless, if you really take a look at Pete's scheme, it hasn't limited Russell Wilson's ability to garner national attention, to lead the league in touchdowns, to lead the league in quarterback rating and efficiency and completion percentage and all that stuff. The only thing he's going to lag behind a little bit is attempts and completions. And, maybe that's, everything is hung on that. And I think that's just really the wrong way to look at it. You're maximizing your efficiency. That's obviously getting you Pro Bowls and national attention and putting you in the Hall of Fame conversation and getting you into the playoffs every year. And I'm just wondering what that next level looks like to somebody like Russ. I mean, winning is really important, and we're, I don't know.
Well, and I think that's what I don't think it has anything to do with stats. I think it has to do with
He wants to get to the conference championship to get himself a chance to get to the Super Bowl.
I think winning is a thing, and I just based on what's been said and what's come out, I think he doesn't feel that the coaching staff last year, in terms of the offensive game plan and scheme design, was putting the team in the best position to win.
We won 8 games in the first. We won 6 games in the first 8. And after things started to kind of get more difficult and fall apart, we won 6 games in the last 8.
Sure. But a lot of, they played some really bad quarterbacks in that second group of 8.
And we were easily predicted to be 1-0 in the playoffs, and we weren't.
Yeah. And so I think it was one of those things where he felt that that wasn't being done in a way that was giving them the best chance to win, and that having the offense be really inefficient or at least inconsistent, because the offensive line was so bad, wasn't giving them the best chance to win. And I think it was more of a, if we're going to win, like, let's not win because we, play slightly less ugly football than the other team. Let's win because we're actually good at something.
We're taking it to them. We're dictating terms.
Yeah, right. and I think that's why he wanted, he wants the offensive line to be fixed and those kind of things, and he wants a scheme that's going to help them be consistent and not just put up points on big plays, but actually move the football and hold on to the ball and have some long drives,
convert third downs.
Yeah, and do
Pete
the thing
said that too. See, that's another thing. It's like everything that Pete has said kind of lines up with what Russ wants. I mean, if you really look at it, Pete says, I want more efficiency. I want to convert more third downs. We were at, 49 or 47% in 2020. I want to be closer to 55 to 57%, which is slightly above league average. All those things seem to align with what Russ is really talking about when you break it all down, yet there's this big disconnect. So I'm not sure. Hopefully they can figure that out. Otherwise we're going to lose our guy. And he obviously has given our franchise the best chance to win in the last 40 plus years. And to move on from that so abruptly is hard to fathom. And it's hard to kind of wrap your brain around it, because it's also right in the middle of all this other stuff. We're trying to plan the off season. You've got free agency starting next week. We're talking about trades. It can completely disrupt what we're talking about in the draft. and it just all seems kind of a little jumbled. So I think we just need to kind of hang out for a little longer, and some of the stuff resolves itself. But it seems like one day we're going to wake up and we're going to click on Twitter, Keith, and Schefter's going to have some announcement, and it's going to be utter chaos. And I'm dreading that moment.
Russell Wilson to the Bears for
a load, but yeah,
for first round picks and
Khalil Mack. Yeah.
Or not, probably not Mack, probably that, I can't remember his name, the linebacker.
Oh, okay.
And that they've got that's, yeah. And so
they've got 3 or 4 players I wouldn't mind having, but I don't even want to have those conversations yet, to be honest.
Agreed. But, I just have, it does feel like one day we're going to pop up Twitter and that's what it's going to be. And it's just going to be like, oh God, no.
Yeah. Because it changes everything.
And absolutely changes everything.
Yeah. Even with the boatload of picks and a couple of premier guys added to your roster and some, cap maneuvering and all that stuff. And they, pledged to put together a competitive team in 2021. Russell Wilson, as you know, has given us a floor of 9 wins since he's been on the roster. And that floor immediately drops with any other quarterback, that's not Watson. If they could orchestrate some 3-way deal where Russell moves, Watson gets here, plus a couple picks, and we end up in equal or better shape long term, just because Watson's perfectly capable and he's younger. Then I think that would be okay for me. I could kind of live with that, and we could figure that out. Anything short of that, like if we get Foles back as a 1-year bridge or whatever, I mean, our season is over before it even begins. So we need to bridge that gap when it comes, I guess.
Yeah, I guess the only thing that would happen is unless they ended up with an early first round pick, like something with the Dolphins or whatnot. So you end up
or the Jets,
high enough to go get a Zach Wilson. And then they could just put Zach Wilson in number 3, and no one has to buy a new jersey.
There you go.
And so that's the kind of I don't know.
Well, then you're starting over. I mean, really, you're literally pushing the reset button, and your clock starts over. And is Pete Carroll up for that challenge? He probably is, but
at 70,
nonetheless, it's a full reset because you're jettisoning everything and you're going with the new thing, a new shiny object in the draft, which has no guarantees of any success whatsoever. And you're trying to build around him and help him. And there's going to be a couple of years of adjustment there. So what are you going to do? I mean, if you have a quarterback that doesn't want to play for your franchise, you have to do something. You can't have that in your locker room and on your team for a full year in a season. It'll ruin your team. This situation could ruin the team anyway, because if Russell Wilson is very well liked and respected in the locker room, and the team has not treated him correctly and then ships him away and then brings in some other guy, that changes the entire dynamic. And you have other players then that are disgruntled, that want to leave, that don't want to play again. Maybe even like a guy like Metcalf, who's literally like a brother, at this point to Wilson. So a lot of things could be affected that we just can't even predict at this point. So you just got to be careful with what you wish for. It's a tough deal. I think that all of this chatter, every word that we've said, hopefully just doesn't mean anything. And eventually these guys come together. That seems to me the most likely outcome, is to have Russell Wilson continue to play out his contract, have him satisfied that the team is addressing these concerns. We all move forward. Everybody's happy, and we come out and have a great year. And that's the best case scenario. And we don't even want to go to the worst case scenario, but to me, that's the most likely outcome.
Agreed.
All right. So next week, let me look at schedule.
Next week's my favorite show of the year.
I don't even have offensive line in the subject line. It's just it's Keith Meyer's show. Yeah, that's what it says.
It's the show that I like, and literally nobody else ever cares about.
I've come to like it. I've dealt with this now for a while, and
we are our fifth one of
swinging
these.
me around to the dark side, Keith, on this. Actually, there's some really good upside players in this draft class. We're going to look at centers, guards, tackles.
Yep.
And the guys that get it done in the trenches. I think that's the key area where Seattle said it wanted to upgrade this year. There's some players that can help us do that in this draft.
Yes, there are. And there's some players that can help this team be significantly better.
Yes. On
the offensive line that don't require first round picks to get.
I agree.
And that is, I like this draft class in terms of the O-line. I'm excited for next week's show.
It falls off a little bit after like the fifth, fifth round, but
it always does.
But between where we've got picks in the second to fourth or fifth, there's many guys that can come in and help, especially now that you have some options at both center and guard, because Shane Waldron, you don't know exactly yet if he's going to be on the more athletic side with smaller guys that can move quicker, or guys that can still set the tone, physical guys that can ram it down your throat and get to the second level still. So there's a lot of options in the draft that can do both. So, all right. Find Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. I'm at NW Seahawk. The show is at Hawks Playbook on Twitter. SeahawksPlaybook.com has all of the shows archived, and your favorite podcast app. You can just search Seahawks Playbook Podcast, and it'll bring that up, and on YouTube. And we need more subscribers on there, so that would be awesome. If you can go to YouTube, get to our show, and hit the subscribe button. That way it lands every week in the feed. So until next time, Keith, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.